Marcus lifted my small gift box high above his head in the middle of the reception hall, his voice cutting through every single conversation in the room. "Is this a joke?" he said loudly. The DJ faded the music down slightly, as if even the speakers wanted to hear what came next. 200 heads turned. Crystal glasses paused halfway to lips. I felt the shift in the room like a cold wind moving through it, that particular silence that only happens when someone is about to be made an example of. I was standing near the far end of the gift table, still holding my clutch purse against my side. My name card was taped neatly to the box. He was now dangling between two fingers like something he had found on the floor of a parking lot. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched him. "Here you go. My name is Brianna, and thank you for listening to my story of betrayal, resilience, and justice. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Are you on your commute, taking a break at work, or cozy at home? Share it in the comments so we can connect and swap stories like this together. If this story pulled you in, don't forget to subscribe, give it a like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next real-life drama. Every share helps these stories reach someone who needs to hear them. Let's keep the conversation and the justice going." Marcus tore the wrapping paper slowly, deliberately, the way people do when they want an audience to stay with them. He wasn't in a hurry. He was enjoying it. The box inside was white. Simple. Unbranded. He held it up for the table nearest to him, letting them see how ordinary it looked. A few people laughed. Short, uncomfortable sounds that were trying to decide if they were polite or cruel. Then he pulled out the gift itself. A small leather journal, navy blue, with gold edging. Practical. Quiet. The kind of thing I had picked because my sister Pauline had mentioned once that she wanted to write more. Marcus turned it over in his hands like he was handling something deeply disappointing. "This wouldn't even cover valet," he said flatly. More laughter. Louder this time. Less uncomfortable. The heat started rising up my neck, slow and steady. "Some people," Marcus announced to no one in particular, setting the journal down on the table with a small thud, "just don't belong in rooms like this." He smiled when he said it. That particular smile that isn't warm at all, the one that's really just teeth. I looked at Pauline. She was seated at the head table in her wedding dress, pearls at her throat, champagne in her hand. For one moment, her eyes found mine across the room. I waited. She gave the smallest nod, barely a tilt of her chin, and looked away. That was the moment the humiliation landed completely. Not Marcus doing it. Pauline allowing it. My own sister, sitting in the dress I had helped her zip up 4 hours ago, choosing silence. Behind me, I heard a woman whisper to the person beside her. "She's always been the poor one." I gripped the strap of my purse and kept my face still. Every part of me wanted to speak. To explain. To pull out my phone and show them numbers that would change the entire temperature of that room in under 10 seconds. But I didn't. I had learned a long time ago that the loudest people in any room are almost never the most secure ones. Marcus was performing. The guests laughing along were following his lead because that is what people do when someone with confidence points in a direction. They look where he's pointing. I was the thing he was pointing at. So I let them look. I let them draw their conclusions. I let the story they were building in their heads grow without any interference from me, because I knew something they didn't know. And I had known it all evening. I just needed to stay calm a little longer. The reception hall was stunning, I'll give it that. Draped in ivory silk and gold candlelight, the kind of venue that whispers money before a single guest walks through the door. The centerpieces alone were works of art, towering arrangements of white roses and eucalyptus that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery bills. Everything about the evening had been designed to be witnessed. The dress. The flowers. The bartenders in matching vests. The custom monogram projected onto the dance floor in pale gold light. Every surface of the night said, "Look at us." I had watched Marcus work the room all evening. Handshakes with intent, laughter that was slightly too loud, stories that always ended with a number. A figure. A deal. A property value. It was a performance. A beautiful, expensive, thoroughly rehearsed performance. And like most performances, it required the audience to believe in it completely. I found myself near the bar during cocktail hour, mostly to have something to hold. That was where I first heard it. Two of Marcus's colleagues were talking quietly, the kind of talking people do when they assume background noise covers them. One of them, a broad-shouldered man in a navy suit, was mentioning the venue. "Gorgeous place," he said. Although I heard they financed most of it. The other man raised an eyebrow. The wedding. The house. Both cars. He swirled his drink. Marcus moves like he's flush, but I know his firm had a rough quarter. They drifted away before I could hear anything more. I didn't follow them. I just stood there with my club soda, letting that quiet piece of information settle into place beside everything else I had noticed that evening. The slightly too eager bragging, the careful way Marcus mentioned numbers without ever quite finishing the sentences. The picture was becoming clearer. People always assumed things about me based on what they could see. I drove a 7-year-old car that I had paid for in full. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of the city that didn't have a doorman or a rooftop pool. I shopped at ordinary stores, cooked most of my own meals, and I had never once posted a photo of a vacation or a handbag on social media. I was a high school English teacher. Everyone knew that. What they didn't know, what I had never felt the need to announce, was what I did with every spare dollar that teaching and careful living set free. I had been doing it for 11 years. Quietly, deliberately, without applause or an audience. It had started small, a few $100s a month, then more as my habits tightened. Over time, it had grown into something I was proud of in the deepest, most private way a person can be proud of something. Silence had always been the point. 11 years is a long time to do anything without being seen. There had been moments, birthday dinners where I ordered the cheaper thing on the menu, weekend trips I declined, a coat I wore 3 winters in a row because it still functioned perfectly well, where I had felt the quiet sting of other people's assumptions. They thought I was struggling. Some of them felt sorry for me in that careful, polite way that is somehow harder to sit with than outright pity. Pauline had once offered to lend me money for a car upgrade, her voice soft with gentle concern, as though she were handling something fragile. I had thanked her and said no. I wasn't going to explain. Explanations invite questions, and questions invite opinions, and I had never wanted anyone's opinion about the way I chose to build my life. The discipline was its own reward. But tonight, I'll admit, had tested that belief more than usual. The gift table moment had happened about 40 minutes before dinner service began. Afterward, I drifted back through the room without speaking to anyone, found my assigned seat at a round table near the back, table 11, which told me everything I needed to know about my placement in the evening's hierarchy, and set my purse down on the chair beside me. I reached into it briefly, checking the envelope I had placed there before leaving my apartment that evening. Still sealed. Still there. I had been going back and forth all week about whether to give it that night or mail it quietly afterward. Giving it at the reception felt more personal, more connected to the occasion. Mailing it afterward felt safer, cleaner, less likely to be misunderstood. I had decided on personal. Now, after the gift table moment, I was reconsidering. I left the purse on the chair and went to get a glass of water. What I didn't notice as I walked away was the envelope slipping silently from the unzipped top and landing face down on the floor beneath the table. I didn't realize it was gone until after the salad course. I reached for my purse to check my phone and felt the unfamiliar lightness of it immediately. The envelope was thick. It gave the bag a particular weight I had gotten used to over the past week. That weight was missing. I looked beneath the table without bending down, obviously. I shifted in my chair. I scanned the immediate area as casually as I could manage without drawing attention. Nothing. My chest tightened. Not because the money was gone, the account would exist whether the paper did or not, but because that envelope had my name on the outside, and the bank statement inside was printed with a balance and a secondary account name that I had not yet explained to anyone. A 5-figure number. In an envelope. Somewhere in a room full of 200 people who had just watched Marcus brand me the cheap one. The account had taken me 3 years to fully fund. I had opened it the year Pauline's daughter, Nina, turned 2. Nina was 5 now, with a gap in her front teeth and a habit of running at full speed toward anyone she loved. She had hugged me that afternoon in the bridal suite, her small arms tight around my neck, smelling like the flower crown someone had placed on her head. "Auntie Brie," she had whispered, "you smell like cookies." I had laughed and held on for an extra moment. Nina had nothing to do with any of this. The performance, the loans, the loud wedding built on borrowed money. She was 5 years old and she was perfect and she deserved a head start that had nothing to do with what her parents chose to spend their money on today. The account was for her college. $42,000, saved in her name, sitting quietly in a fund that would grow for the next 13 years. And now that envelope was somewhere on the floor of this reception hall. The dinner plates were being cleared when I saw Marcus push back from the head table and make his way over to the gift area. He was in high spirits, jacket unbuttoned, glass of whiskey in hand, shaking hands with guests as he passed. Someone had asked to take photos of the gift table. I heard him explaining something about getting it all documented before the venue cleared it at the end of the night. He began straightening the arrangement of boxes and bags with the careless authority of a man who feels entirely at home being in charge of things. I watched him from across the room. He nudged a bag aside, lifted a card to read it, set it back down with the satisfied expression of someone accounting for their popularity. Then he bent slightly and picked something up from the floor. A white envelope. Face down. He turned it over. I saw the exact moment his brain registered what he was reading. He had opened it without hesitation. The envelope wasn't sealed particularly tightly, and I suspected he assumed it was a card that had slipped from one of the other gifts. He pulled the folded paper out with one hand, still holding his whiskey glass in the other. He read the first line. Then he stopped moving. Not in a dramatic way. Not the kind of freeze you see in movies, where a person drops everything and gasps. This was smaller and therefore more telling, the particular stillness of someone whose mind is working faster than their face can process. His eyes moved back to the top of the page. He read it again. The glass in his hand lowered slowly until it was resting at his side. Someone nearby noticed the shift in him before anyone else, a woman in a green dress who had been standing close to the gift table. She tilted her head toward him. "Everything okay?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. The woman in the green dress leaned slightly to see what Marcus was holding. "What is it?" she asked again. He looked up from the paper. Back down. Up again. The arrogance that had been running steady all evening like a well-maintained engine had stalled. "It's a bank statement," he said finally. His voice was careful now. Slower. The woman in the green dress peered closer. "Whose?" Marcus said my name, Brianna, in a tone I had never heard him use before. Quiet. Almost cautious. "Your sister-in-law," the woman said. "The one from the gift table?" He nodded once. Another guest stepped closer, a tall man who had been at the table nearest the gift display all evening. He angled his head to see the paper in Marcus's hand, and his eyebrows rose before he could arrange his expression into something more neutral. "Wait," he said quietly. A pause. "Is that over 40,000? The number moved through the room the way a lit match moves through dry grass. Quietly at first, and then all at once. I watched it happen from my seat at table 11. The woman in the green dress said something low to the couple beside her. The tall man with the raised eyebrows turned to someone at his left. A cluster formed near the gift table, not large, not obvious, but present, the kind of gathering that forms around something unexpected. Heads turned in my direction, but differently than before. Before, the looks had been amused. Slightly pitying. The look people give the person who has confirmed their assumptions. These looks were recalibrating in real time. I sat still, both hands flat on the table in front of me, watching the information travel. Then I saw Pauline stand up from the head table. Someone had reached her. The expression on her face was one I recognized from childhood, the look she got when she realized she had misread a situation entirely and was working out very quickly how much damage that misreading had done. She walked toward the gift table. Pauline took the paper from Marcus without asking for it. He let her have it without resistance, which told me the number had already done something to his confidence that no amount of composure could quickly repair. She read it standing up, the paper held in both hands, her wedding dress pulled slightly at her feet. I could see her lips moving faintly, the way they always had when she was reading something she needed to fully absorb. She looked up at me across the room. "This can't be yours," she said. She said it with genuine disbelief, not cruelty, not mockery. Just the flat confusion of someone confronting a fact that doesn't fit the story they have been telling for years. I said nothing. She looked back down at the paper. Read the secondary account name. Nina's name. Read the balance again. Brianna. Her voice had changed completely. This is $42,000. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. I know, I said quietly. Marcus did the math quickly. I could see it happening behind his eyes. He was a man who thought in numbers, property values, quarterly figures, cost per head at a venue like this one. Numbers were his language, and that meant this particular number had landed in a place where he could fully understand its weight. $42,000. Liquid. Saved. Already allocated. More organized wealth than he currently held in any single account, if what I had overheard at the bar was even partially true. His jaw tightened. He looked at me from across the room, not with the easy superiority of an hour ago, but with something unfamiliar on his face, something that looked uncomfortable sitting there, like a man who had dressed for the wrong weather. The whiskey glass was now on the gift table. Both his hands were free, but he didn't seem to know what to do with them. For the first time that evening, Marcus looked uncertain. The version of the night he had been narrating out loud had just been revised without his permission. The laughter was gone. Not faded gone. The particular noise that had followed his joke about the valet, the ripple of it that had moved from his table outward, the way my sister's small nod had punctuated it, all of it had simply ceased to exist as a sound in the room. The people who had left were now occupied with their dessert plates, with their phones, with conversations that had found a sudden new direction. Nobody was looking at the gift table anymore. Nobody was looking at me with pity anymore either. I stood up from table 11 slowly, straightened the front of my dress, picked up my clutch purse and held it at my side. The room was still full of people, still lit with gold candlelight, the DJ still playing something soft in the background. Nothing about the space had changed, but the arrangement of power inside it had shifted completely, the way a room feels entirely different after someone opens a window. I walked toward the gift table. I kept my voice low when I spoke. Not because I was afraid of being heard. The people nearest to us were paying attention, and I knew it, but because I didn't need volume. Volume was for people who weren't sure they had the room. I had the room. I've always been fine, I said. I said it to Pauline, who was still holding the paper. To Marcus, who was standing 2 feet away from her. To the general vicinity of the gift table where the evening's most memorable exchange had taken place. No anger in it. No performance. No attempt to land a line or pause for effect. Just a fact, delivered in the same tone I used to explain things to my students when I wanted them to understand something clearly the first time. Pauline opened her mouth. Closed it. Marcus studied the floor. The money isn't for you, I continued, my voice still steady. It isn't for tonight. It isn't to prove anything to anyone in this room. I looked at both of them. It's for your daughter. The stillness that followed was different from the silence after Marcus's joke. That silence had been the held breath of a crowd watching something cruel unfold. It had an edge to it, a readiness to laugh again if the opportunity presented itself. This silence was the kind that comes after something lands that no one can argue with. It's a college fund, I said. For Nina. $42,000, opened 3 years ago. It'll keep growing until she's 18. Pauline's grip on the paper loosened. She looked down at her daughter's name printed beside mine on the account details. A woman nearby pressed her hand briefly to her chest without appearing to realize she was doing it. Pauline's carefully maintained wedding day composure had developed a visible crack. She took a small step backward, and I recognized the motion, the physical reflex of a person who needs slightly more space to process something that has caught them entirely off guard. Marcus said nothing at all. He recovered himself enough to attempt a laugh. It came out short and unconvincing, the auditory equivalent of a car engine that catches for half a second and then doesn't turn over. Hey, he said, hands coming up briefly. We were just joking around earlier. You know how weddings get? Everyone's a little loose, having a good time. His voice had a new quality in it. Softer. Rounder at the edges. The careful warmth of someone who has realized, very recently, that they have been rude to someone they shouldn't have been rude to, and are now hoping the damage is reversible. I had heard that tone before. I had learned what it meant. It did not mean sorry. It meant I have new information about you and I am adjusting my behavior accordingly, which is a completely different thing. I looked at him steadily for a moment. Then I looked away. Not dramatically. I simply moved my attention to something else, the way you do when a conversation has finished. Pauline tried next. She folded the bank statement carefully, not handing it back. I noticed, folding it, and stepped closer to me. Her voice dropped to the register she used when she wanted something to feel private, even in a crowd. "You should have told us," she said. "If we had known." She left this sentence open, the way people do when they haven't worked out yet how it ends. I looked at her. My older sister. In her wedding dress. At her reception. With the flowers she had shown me pictures of for 9 months, and the venue she had described in careful detail, and the husband who had held my gift in the air like evidence of my failure. I thought about 11 years of quiet savings. Of declined invitations and no explanations offered. Of the consistent assumption that my silence on the subject meant I had nothing to say. "You never asked," I said. 3 words. No sharpness in them. Just the answer to her sentence, plain and complete. She had nothing to follow that with. They stood there together. Pauline in her ivory gown, Marcus in his unbuttoned jacket, and something about the way they were standing made the performance of the evening suddenly visible in a way it hadn't been before. Not the wedding. The wedding was beautiful and real. But the posture of it, the loud certainty, the ranking of guests by the perceived value of their gifts, the easy comfort with which Marcus had pointed at me and named me lesser, all of that had a different shape now. It looked like what it was. Not strength. Not security. Just noise from people who needed the noise. I thought about the colleague at the bar, his quiet words about loans and a rough quarter. I thought about the numbers Marcus had casually dropped all evening that never quite had endings. I thought about the way truly secure people almost never need the room to know it. They weren't wealthy. They were loud. And loudness, in my experience, is what fills the space that security is supposed to occupy. He apologized. Standing there beside the gift table with the DJ playing something upbeat in the background and the dessert plates being quietly removed from nearby tables, Marcus said the words. "I'm sorry, Brianna. Genuinely. That was out of line." I listened to it. I noticed the way his eyes moved, briefly to Pauline, briefly to the couple still standing close enough to overhear, then back to me. I noticed the timing of it, how it arrived after the $42,000 had become a number in the room and not before. I noticed that his voice was the same careful warmth it had been when he said we were just joking, the warmth of recalculation, not regret. The room could feel it too. I could tell by the slight stillness of the nearby guests, the way nobody murmured anything reassuring in response. Real apologies have a texture that people recognize instinctively. This one was hollow. I reached over and took the folded bank statement gently from Pauline's hand. Placed it back in my purse. I said one more thing before I left. I said it quietly, to both of them, standing at the edge of the gift table in the gold light of a reception that had cost more than it should have. "I didn't bring that gift to impress you," I said. "I brought it because Nina deserves a future that isn't built on what tonight looks like." Then I picked up my purse, excused myself to the couple nearby with a small nod, and walked to the exit. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. I had come to my sister's wedding and I had sat at table 11 and I had watched a man hold my gift in the air like a punchline. I had stayed still through all of it, and the stillness had held, and the truth had surfaced the way it always does when you leave it alone long enough. Behind me, the hall was quiet. No laughter. No superiority. No performance playing to the back rows. Just 200 people sitting with the particular silence of a room that has just understood something it cannot take back. I stepped outside into the cool night air. They had spent 11 years building something that needed to be seen to exist. I had spent 11 years building something that existed whether anyone saw it or not. That night, only one of those things had held its value. And as I walked to my 7-year-old car, fully paid for, parked under a quiet sky, I felt nothing like the woman they had decided I was. I felt exactly like myself.